keep moving on. Do you want to go to reset that light for us, please? Thanks.
Want to make it to green?
You don't know if I made it to green.
Okay, I'll make it.
Our next speaker, Mr. Lloyd Smith, says, anthropologists have been arguing for many years about how humans develop tools and what the first tool might have been. A majority of them agree on one kind of tool, and remarkably, we still use the modern version of that tool today. In Project 3, the demonstration talk from the Advanced Communications Series Manual, Speaking to Inform, Lloyd will demonstrate how to use this tool effectively, efficiently, and safely. Lloyd Smith, and everything is a nail. Lloyd.
Do any of you remember the old Gary Larson cartoon Far Side? Remember the caveman in there was always named Thag? And I pictured Thag the caveman sitting in his cave way back when, thousands of years ago. He needs to break a stick, and he reaches for a rock and whacks the stick. And that is what anthropologists think the first tool was, the hammer. And today, we still use hammers. The odds are that most of you in here have at least one of them hanging around the house somewhere. It's one of those tools that looks so simple that anybody can use it. In fact, it doesn't seem to require any intelligence at all, hence the saying, as dumb as a bag of hammers. A bird. Anyway, it does take some knowledge, though, to operate a hammer, believe it or not. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. If you own a hammer, the odds are it looks a lot like this one, a classic claw hammer.
The one on the left.
You can tell why this is called a claw hammer, because this part of it is vaguely claw shaped. This is a much more complicated tool than you might think. This one is also rusty, as I can see. Not my fault. Actually, it is. I've had this about 30 years, maybe 35 years or so. When you buy a hammer, the key things to look for are, first of all, the heft of it, whether it feels comfortable. This is a 16-ounce hammer, which is the most common kind of claw hammer there is. And it's typically used by carpenters. My dad was a carpenter, and he's the one who told me to buy this particular hammer. This has a fiberglass handle. Wood and fiberglass are better than steel, which is another option to buy because it puts less stress on your arm when you're using it. The interesting thing about claw hammers is that they're not all like this. For example, this one you can tell is smaller. This is a 13-ounce claw hammer. Why would you want a smaller hammer? If you have smaller nails, obviously. There are plenty of times when you don't want a large hammer to whack on a small nail. It typically doesn't work. It's even smaller than that, like this one, for example, which is used for things like picture frames and so on. Hammers come in lots of different sizes and shapes. This one is an unusual one. The hammer weighs almost nothing, but it has lead shot in it. This is called a dead blow or dead fall hammer. When you hit something with this, it doesn't bounce. And that's what usually leaves that extra dimple in the hunk of wood when you're trying to be really careful and not dent it when you pound the nail in. There's another kind. This is called a tack hammer. This is used for like picture frames and whatnot. If you use a regular hammer on a picture frame, you're probably going to be pretty unhappy when you're done with the job. Also, have you ever tried to pound a really small nail with a regular size hammer and then whack your thumb? Everybody does. That's how you recognize carpenters, by the way, black thumbs. But anyway, a little small hammer like this solves that problem. Now, once you have your hammer, you have to know how to operate it. And what I'd like to concentrate on are two things that lots and lots of people do poorly. One of them is this. There is a tendency to use this claw part of the hammer for things other than woodworking. In other words, people will try to pick up flagstones off of patios or something, pry them apart, or pry open a metal box or a car door or something that, that is locked. That's a very bad idea. The reason is it puts a lot of stress on the part of the hammer that connects to the handle. And that stress can be very subtle. It can be almost invisible. And you might not know it until sometime when you're swinging the hammer and the head flies off.
No.
That's a very, very bad thing to have happen, have this chunk of steel fly over, especially if you've got, like, say, a kid standing near you, or a glass patio door or something like that. The other thing that people frequently do wrong with a hammer is that they'll try to, they'll like hook a nail and decide to get more leverage on it by whacking one hammer with another hammer. Now that sounds like a pretty good idea, and it looks sort of like it's meant to be, you know, but it's not. The reason is this part of the face of the hammer, the face of the head of the hammer is hardened steel, and hardening it makes it, you know, harder. That's probably why they call it that. But it also makes it more brittle. And so when you slam two of these things together, it's quite possible to have metal shrapnel fly around. That's also a poor idea. One of the basic rules of using a hammer, by the way, is to always wear safety glasses. Nobody in the real world ever does that, and that's why they get hurt when they do something like that. You don't really need to whack a hammer anyway, because they make other tools like this, which you can use to whack the hammer with. Now, why can you do that? Because this is not hardened steel. And so it's not going to shatter the face of the hammer. Another thing that people do wrong frequently is that they try to get the nail right down onto the face of the wood, and that almost always leaves a round dimple, and then you get to find out how skilled you are using wood putty or spackling. Typically, that doesn't work well. They make things called nail sets. In other words, you pound the nail down a little bit, then pound it down the rest of the way with this, and you won't get that big dimple in there. Now, let's talk a little bit about technique. Hammers seem pretty simple to use. You just swing it until you pound the nail down, right? Not exactly. If you do that for, say, 8 hours, your arm will probably fall off. The problem that lots of people have who are not very skilled at using a hammer, or they're beginners, is that they'll grip the hammer up near the head, and that gives you the illusion of having more control over it. But it also gives you a lot less leverage on the hammer. And so if you pound a lot of nails, it's going to take a tremendous amount of energy and put a lot of stress on your arm. What you need to do is grip it down near the end. That's why they put this grippy thing on it, so that you can hold there rather than up here. And then also, lots of people will go like this with a hammer. They'll use their wrist. And that, again, makes it seem like you're controlling it better. But your wrist is an extremely complex mechanism. There are all kinds of little bones and tendons and ligaments in there. If you do that for a number of hours, you're going to have a big, big problem, as in like orthopedic problem. What you need to do with a hammer is to get in the habit of holding your wrist stationary and swinging your entire arm. It's much easier to do, and the reason is the muscles in your shoulders and upper arm are much stronger than all of the muscles in your forearm. Now, it seems like you have less control, but with a little bit of practice, you actually have more doing it that way, because it's the same motion every single time. A real trick to using a hammer is how do you hammer overhead? And I was always amazed when I watched my dad do that. He was a carpenter for close to 50 years, because he would just do it like that. But there again, he was holding his wrist steady and using his arm to do it like that. So what does this mean? If you're going to use a hammer safely and efficiently and without damaging your arm or whatnot, hold it correctly with the grip, keep your wrist steady, and swing your entire arm. Practice is the only way to get really good at nailing nails. I would have brought in some nails to nail, but I moved recently and I can't find any of my scrap wood or my entire bucket of nails. So, Mr. Toastmaster, come up here and let's have a hammer power.
Thank you, Lloyd. Let's go ahead and give everybody a minute on the clock for